So good morning, everybody. So how many people here actually attended the summit last year? Raise your hands. That's really great. So there's quite a few people in here maybe that don't know who I am. But earlier you heard Michelle state that I am Tiffany DeZita and I'm the Executive Director of Community Land Trust, or CLT, as we like to refer to ourselves as. And joining me here today is Manya Hermosi, and she's our Director of Development. So this morning, we've been asked to tell you a story. When we were reflecting on our presentation, I said this to Manya this morning, I was kind of like, we really should have done our presentation style of more truly like a story, because it really is a fairy tale story when we look at what we do in the community housing sector. Because this is a story that is full of characters, some that are scary. We've got some scary buildings. We have a bad incident that happened that created a serious conflict. And then we have a hero that came along and a happy ending as well. So I'm pleased to present to you this morning the story of Hoy Creek, from receivership to redevelopment. But before we can begin, I really need to tell a little bit about the story of who we are. And this will elaborate on what Michelle was talking to you about this morning. And it's really kind of the key of our success and our partnerships and what we are doing in the co-op housing sector. Because at CLT, our focus is on creating and preserving permanently affordable housing solutions for people. And solutions and being solution-orientated really is a big part of what we do. And as you know, we are established by the Cooperative Housing Federation of BC in 2015. And since we're owned by BC's cooperative housing sector, there is a focus on us with going, I guess, that extra mile with regards to finding those solutions for housing co-ops. So we create not only just buildings, but we're creating communities that people can call home. And we do this by driving growth in the non-market sector and developing new housing co-ops, preserving them and redeveloping, like the story you're going to hear today about Hoy Creek, and then also being able to leverage these success stories to build upon the value of our portfolio and continue to grow housing co-ops in BC. So we own the properties and the buildings that provide for a new type of housing co-op, one that is built for the urban environment and combining the benefits of co-op living with professional development, finance, property and asset management. And our success is really built on the trust. And Michelle had emphasized that word earlier today, trust, and how we put the care in for the land, but also for our partners with the investment of their funds into our developments and the homes that we are creating in those communities that people can call home. So when we look at housing co-ops that want to partner with the community land trusts, they're not really giving up their independence as a housing co-op. We're often asked this question, if we partner with the CLT and you own the property and you own the buildings and you're coming in with all this professional services, how are we still a housing co-op? Well, really, they are still a housing co-op. They still maintain that democratic control. And that democratic control that they maintain, not only before they became part of the CLT like Hoy Creek, still translates into who they are today. And that democratic control was a key factor in Hoy Creek when they were able to sell their homes. Because they're actually gaining support with an organization. So it's not just, you don't have to think about it like, do I own title to my land? You're looking at that partnership on how to preserve and steward their homes. So they're getting that support that helps them preserve and maintain their homes and the communities for years to come. So every time that I'm really asked to speak about housing Hoy Creek and the redevelopment, this picture that you see up there is really the picture that always comes to mind for me. Because as you can see, these buildings are boarded up. They don't look great, and they're very much in a state of disrepair. But it really symbolizes the event that started everything, that led to one of our greatest opportunities. In 2016, these townhomes that you see in the photo here were already condemned due to early building failure. The co-op itself was facing significant financial challenges and a mortgage default. You could imagine if 1/3 of your homes within your project are not habitable and the amount of revenue that you would lose from that. It puts stress on the remaining homes and also on the affordability of that, which then also triggered not being able to actually start paying the mortgage payment. And then you also inherit a liability by having vacant homes on your property. And that's what happened in 2016. A fire broke out in these townhomes. And that triggered a limited receivership by CMHC for the demolition of the townhomes. And then a very aggressive tactic to push for full control of a full receivership of the property where the lands would have been marketed to the private sector and lost forever. At that point, the future of the co-op was unknown. So then we fast forward 6 months, and on a hot evening in June of 2017, I remember making our way out to Coquitlam. Mike Walker from Miller Thompson attended that meeting with myself and our CEO, Tom Armstrong. And we attended a meeting with the board of Hoy Creek Housing Co-op. And this is where that democratic process of a housing co-op really comes into play, where they can make a decision on how to either just continue on with the receivership and just with the uncertainty of their homes and just accept a process that they felt that they had no control over, or they could actually form a partnership with us to help preserve their homes. So at that time when we went out there, the receivership was still underway. But behind the scenes, with every ally that we could find in BC and across the country, we managed to get CMHC to put a pause on the push for the full control of the property, to allow us time to find a solution and keep the land in community ownership and preserve the co-op tenure and the property in the hands of the community sector. They gave us 3 months to resolve a very complex receivership. But we like a challenge at the CLT, so challenge accepted. So that night in June, with nothing left to lose and only a common drive to succeed, that evening CLT and Hoy Creek agreed to form a partnership to save their homes and the property and the co-op tenure for generations to come. So needless to say, we did find success. But Manya's going to go continue on with the story here and share with you the redevelopment and demonstrate how CLT is building a legacy of safe, secure, and permanently affordable housing. So Manya?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Manya Hormozi. I'm the Director of Development with the Community Land Trust Foundation of BC. And I'm going to walk you guys through the redevelopment of our story here with Hoy Creek. So, as Tiffany mentioned, the townhomes were the ones that were hit with a fire. So naturally, we're in the middle of a big parcel of land, through which goes a creek that's called Hoy Creek in the city of Coquitlam. So we are looking at redevelopment of this site through a comprehensive development plan and the phasing of this redevelopment. From the perspective of disruption, community, we wanted to make sure we do this in a very thoughtful manner because we had a co-op who was already living on that site. And their property and their buildings that were still existing and habited were in areas where it's called Zone 2 and 3 on the diagram, and where you see Zone 1, which is red, that's where the townhomes were. So the first phase, of course, was the demolition of those townhomes, and the first phase of our development is to replace that site with a new development. So it was an infill. During the assessment and feasibility of the redevelopment, at the time, there was not a good policy from the city of Coquitlam that we could follow that was economically viable for us to go after the density that was actually secured on that site from an affordable housing perspective. So we had to really scale down our development to make it economically viable. And we came up with something which is, we think, a very good comprehensive plan, and it really helped save and secure the people's homes there. So phase one of the development started in construction in March 2021, and we finished development earlier this year in February 2024. The housing co-op was successfully relocated into their new homes. So that's the 97-member household that were moved in. And we had additional members that were moving in that were making Hoy Creek Housing Co-op their home for the first time. This is truly a success story of how we can preserve and redevelop and really keep community assets in the community and grow upon that. From there, to make the funding and the financial feasibility of this project possible, as everybody is aware, affordable housing is not easy to do without multiple layers of funding and grants. So to make Hoy Creek Phase 1 possible, CLT applied to the Community Housing Fund, which is a provincial program through BC Housing, through CMHC, co-investment fund, and also contributions from the municipality, which is the city of Coquitlam. So we basically layered everything we could on to make this a possibility and keep affordability at a level that that existing community would not feel displaced or their affordability being affected by this new development. The building looks great, we think. It houses people and unit mix from studios, 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, and 3 bedrooms. So the family units were, family homes were able to be preserved in the mix as well. And we actually tried to achieve 5% of accessible units. And as our property team always tells me, our accessible units are the first ones to go because that's a huge need in the market of affordable housing to deliver accessible units. So phase 1 of this development, when it got completed, and we're moving towards the second phase, the funding and the programs and the available sources, we were really not successful in getting additional provincial funding at the time. So we had to wait a few years to really find this funding strategy that was making phase 2 of this development viable. But it was really earlier this year through the announcement of BC Builds through the provincial program and also the co-op development, the co-op housing development fund through CMHC that we saw an avenue to really create further housing here and bring the funding for this project to kind of move forward with the phase 2 of our development. And for phase 2, we are now layering on additional programs, that is BC Builds financing and funding, and also CMHC's co-op housing fund. So hopefully with these funds are actually allocated to this project, we will see construction start on phase 2 in fall 2025, and also with a hopeful completion of this project in 2028 summer. The next step for that would be phase 3 of this development, which would be a creation of 122 homes. And what was the original investment of this property in the receivership that Tiffany mentioned was about a $7 million loan, which CLT undertook in partnership with the housing co-op. What is going to be created here is 400 homes at a value of $220 million. So that just shows how keeping the community investment in the housing sector, in the affordable housing sector, you can see how that basically creates additional homes, additional value, and really that's the success story of Hoy Creek, that they went from a real situation of hardship, fire, receivership, financial difficulty, through a partnership and a land trust model, bringing additional homes and really securing the affordability and that co-op tenure, keeping that community together and really giving people a secure place to call their home. We wanted to keep this presentation really casual and informal. It ended up not being that, but we want to actually ask for this session to be more of an interactive one, so you can ask us questions, ask us how we did certain things, and then we can maybe walk you through some of the various different findings for that. The final redevelopment of Hoy Creek looks like this. So this is once the full 3 phases of development are completed. What you see is an L shape in the middle is our phase 1 that's already complete. The one that's right close to the street is phase 2, and the one behind that is phase 3 once it will be completed. I'm going to now, I rushed through that, I don't know why, but I wanted to open this up to questions. Yes? Yes, absolutely. I can talk about the stacked funding. So for phase one, we applied to the Community Housing Fund, which is a provincial program. That program specifically has very prescriptive affordability and design requirements. So you have to adhere to the BC Housing Design Guidelines, and the affordability is a mix of 30, 20, 50. So 30% of the units have to be at what is called low end of market, geared towards low to moderate income thresholds, which is set by the province. 50% of the units are rent geared to income. So that is folks who are below housing income limits. Again, these are limits that are set by the province and are region specific. Will be paying 30% of their household income towards the shelter component of their expenses, which is their rent or housing charges that we like to call in co-ops. And then the other 20% are deep core need, which are folks that are on welfare or on income assistance. And that basically is the affordability mix for the Community Housing Fund model. The contributions that came through for that was $14 million of the Community Housing Fund investment as a capital investment. That program also comes with a 60-year operating agreement. Sounds long, but it comes with also support dollars, which is operating dollars during that period. CMHC, through their COI program, so co-investment program, provided a contribution only, which is a forgivable grant, for $8.2 million. City of Coquitlam provided $3.3 million, which was $2.9 million towards the capital improvements of the project, and $400,000 towards operational support. So that went towards transit, giving people passes to use transit, encouraging use of transportation, because we were asking for a reduction of parking. So we were trying to improve the use of transit as a way of justifying why we were doing a reduced parking structure. The site itself was a little bit complicated. The creek itself created some challenges with the water table. So we were really faced with lots of challenges during construction. Our construction was delayed, and we had to balance that with, moving construction along while people were still living in the aged buildings that they were in, patching the roofs as it went along, and during the winter, and keeping the buildings cool during the summer months, because we were faced with unforeseen delays because of our soil condition and geographical challenges. But we made it through, and they're really happy with their new homes, and happy that they could keep their community together. Oh, thank you, Nat.
Yeah, it is. Here, I think we'll go.
Thank you. This is an incredibly inspiring project. I've always thought that land trust, buildings, affordable housing, attainable housing should be spread throughout a whole city. I come from Kamloops. You've massed a tremendous amount of units in one big piece of property, which I'm sure has given you some economies of scale. Just wonder if you could touch on how that's massing them like that does have advantages.
Do you mean like economies of scale once the building is built, and for how to operate the property?
Building it, getting it going, the whole project, as opposed to spreading those units throughout the city.
Yeah.
The buildings throughout the city.
Yeah, definitely. The property is quite large, as you can see. We're going to take it from, up to about 400 homes. It could have been more, but there was a hiccup in just how municipalities with their planning policy for affordable housing. So I think there's two things to look at for the economies of scale and how to leverage. So, for instance, this property, if you kind of look at it just from an asset itself, it's delivering quite a large number of units on one property in the city center of Coquitlam. We've also been able to leverage that property when you think about a portfolio, right? So we've been able to leverage this property because it's also a freehold piece of property. And that has also allowed us to provide guarantees as we look for other properties to preserve. So this was also able to leverage until we get our final mortgage takeout to preserve 290 homes that are about 1 block away from this building as well, which were 2 properties that were subject to a sale to the private sector. And we were able to purchase those with help from the Rental Protection Fund. So there's, I would think, like, don't think of it as economies of scale, but how do you leverage the property to do more? So we've been able to kind of recycle this piece of property a couple of times with regards to that. And then, yes, when you are looking at the number of homes and a lot, and this is very unique with housing co-ops as well, because I think the average size of a housing co-op in Michelle is like 50, around 50 homes in BC. Most of our housing co-ops are going to be greater than 100 homes. So that does start to provide some economies when we're looking at doing this partnership and providing all those services in there, and to build up that team that is going to actually make sure that these buildings are preserved, not only for the people that live there today and then for tomorrow. Because there's certain static costs, like so if you have a building manager, right? You might find a building manager there for like 50 units, but that one building manager could also manage 200 homes, right? So you still start to get economies of scale. They're not as significant as what we originally thought, though. The economies of scale are really coming in some of those static costs, which are going to be your staffing. However, as you start to grow your portfolio, you can use that size then to also leverage for buying power or looking at contracts across, like, say, a landscaper and that type of stuff. But you've got to build that portfolio, then source your value to some of those vendors so that you might be able to start to negotiate on some of your pricing. And we're just starting to enter that environment right now. So it's hard for me to tell, except for on staffing, of what the true cost savings is as you start to look at large developments.
Thank you.
I'm going to add to that. So you have to understand, this site being large, it was, from a development perspective, because of the creek that goes through it, quite challenging. Because a lot of that area is, you have to have setbacks, you cannot develop that whole site. And kind of layering on municipal requirements, design requirements, does scale that back a little bit from where you think is a huge site, you're delivering lots of homes, from what you may have been able to do on a different site of similar scale if it didn't have those constraints. So you could probably go higher. We were constrained to like a 6-story wood frame, so that just tapped us out at that 6-story. But for economies of scale, if you're thinking about large, going up is my always a preferred method. And if you want to do wood frame, keeping it at a 4-story level always keeps the cost down. You go to the 6, you have to seismically upgrade, so it kind of brings the cost up. Sometimes building more is not always more cost effective, so you have to always be able to balance the structure, the form of construction with what you can build on a site. Anybody else? Oh, it's there, and then let's go there.
I would just love to hear more, and if you guys could expand on your partnership with the municipality, and did you get the funding through like existing programs from the city, or did you have to forge like a whole new one to fund it?
No, City of Coquitlam has an existing program that comes with a housing agreement. So that was actually a program that they are still utilizing even for the acquisition of the properties that are a block away. So City of Coquitlam is one of the few municipalities that actually has a funding pot set aside, and you have to be able to perform on an affordability level, and that basically is a formulated contribution based on how much affordability you can actually deliver on that site. Based on the Community Housing Fund, which is the BC Housing Program, this site was delivering on the first phase deep levels of affordability. For the second phase, we're accessing the same exact program, but where the affordabilities of the second phase are slightly different because the BC Builds program is more prescribed to the middle income bracket of housing, and their program at a minimum requires you to deliver 20% of your units at like 80% of MMR. So it's a slightly different affordability metric, but you can still access the same fund from the municipality of Coquitlam.
Are you local
Thank
from
you.
BC?
No, I'm from Toronto.
Okay.
Oh, okay. What province?
Toronto, Ontario.
Okay. Yeah, so most municipalities, especially in urban centers, will have some affordable housing policy and fund. I'd encourage you to seek that out, but also challenge what their policy states if you have an opportunity. And when we were able to acquire, so on this project, we got the 3.3 million, we followed their policy to the script. When it came to then preserving the 290 homes down the street that we wanted to purchase that were being marketed, we challenged their policy by saying that the local government also needed to step up. Often we're faced in municipalities, and part of our role as well is being advocates for housing as well, and to push the boundaries. So always push the boundaries with your local government as well. A lot of times we are faced and they say, well, housing is a responsibility of senior levels of government. It's not our responsibility. It's everybody's responsibility. And push the boundaries of some of their policies to look outside of the box. Council can make those decisions because they've done it for us here, and in Coquitlam they have done it. So I'd encourage you that if you're faced with those things and you're like, I don't fit, right? So, but I need to access some more money to help with this initiative. Challenge.
Hi, Sunday Miller. I'm with the Kuma from Halifax.
I'm terribly sorry.
You can't hear me? Okay, yeah, got it. Sunday Miller from Halifax with the Kuma. And we have land that we sort of act like as a community land trust, but we're also interested with people who've approached us for co-ops. So I'm interested in how you've worked out the negotiation and the partnership between the community land trust and the co-op housing. Because you said, you made a comment of how they were concerned about how they were going to keep their independence. So if you could give a bit more information on that, and what were some of the things that the co-op was concerned about, and what were the concerns of the land trust, and how you worked those out, that would be great.
Yeah, that's actually a great question, because the story of how we even got to where we are today and our approach has really evolved. I remember when I first started, it was kind of like I went out and I would talk to housing co-ops that might be facing financial difficulty or were looking for redevelopment. And I think internally I got nicknamed the land grabber. And I was like, what is this, the land grabber? I'm trying to go out and I'm trying to find solutions and I'm helping people. And it really was, so the story of Hoy Creek is interesting because they were faced with a very unknown future with limited choice because of that receivership. But our approach and the success of coming out of this story with Hoy Creek very much, brought awareness to the housing co-op sector is that the community land trust isn't here as the land grabber and taking away the autonomy. We're here to look at solutions and to partner to ensure that their homes are either preserved or rebuilt and redevelopment, and through redevelopments, so that more people can enjoy what they've enjoyed for the past, and most of them would probably be about 40 years old when we're looking at the redevelopment. So our approach in the beginning really started just with conversations, right? Hoy Creek's a little bit different because remember CMHC gave us 3 months to find a solution. Backs are all up against a wall. We had an opportunity. But our other success, piggybacking off of this, starts with a lot of conversations, talking with the housing co-op boards, et cetera. But we're from the co-op housing sector. We are owned by the Cooperative Housing Federation of BC, and those member co-ops that are part of CHFBC, by that membership association, have access to a full real estate, social purpose real estate development entity. So some of those conversations and breaking it down and realizing that we're a resource and a solution to some obstacles and challenges that they're facing versus somebody that's just going to come in and take everything away from them. And seeing some of the success stories is really what opened up those conversations and led to more opportunity. We've evolved with our relationship over time, And our relationship with our housing co-ops today on that partnership is the Community Land Trust owns the land and the buildings on there, whether that be a freehold title or a leasehold title. We have a lease back with our housing co-op partners where they basically are occupying those homes and they're managing their community as well. We also provide the full management services as well. So we come with the full team, that's the property management, the building operations, and also on the asset management. And so it binds us together in a sector-owned, community land trust that basically says, you're gonna be stewards of your community and your members, and we're gonna take care of the heavy lifting on the real estate. But we're gonna work together because the two have to work together, right? So by binding us in our leasehold structure, we're able to keep that accountability and transparency back and forth to one another in a true partnership. So that's whether it's sharing of financials or if you have a challenge, your challenges are our challenges, right? So we spend a lot of time sitting with boards. They might have a challenge with a tricky membership or an issue that they're facing that might impact some legal obligations under the lease with us, but we don't say go figure it out on your own. If you come to us with a problem, your problem is our problem because we're bound together in that relationship and that partnership. So, part of the success in what we have is because we're owned by the sector and our focus is on the housing co-ops.
Slide that button up. Yep.
No. There we go. Hi. So you have this unique experience now of actually redeveloping an existing co-op. I think you have several of these. So what interests me specifically is that phase of the work where you have to relocate the people who currently live there. And as you begin demolition, move through development activities, and then eventually reoccupation of the new building. So could you describe a little bit how that was undertaken, and did the existing co-op actually play a role through that phase of redevelopment? Thank you.
I'm terribly sorry. You came in very quiet, but I picked up what happened during to the existing housing co-op during the redevelopment and how were they displaced or relocated. If that's the gist of what you said, I hope I captured that. So I'm showing you an image here. Zone 1 and Zone 3 were existing buildings which were for the housing co-op. The original composition on the site was 97 homes through apartment structures in 2 buildings and 60 townhomes. The townhomes were in the red zone, which is Zone 1, and they were the ones who were under fire in 2016, and then they were demolished. So that's what actually established our phasing approach to our redevelopment, which is the townhomes were already condemned, so there was no occupants in those townhomes. And the residents, the 97 residents, were in 2 buildings, which were in zones 2 and 3. So that's what happened in February when we received, the building was complete. So those 97 households moved into the new development, which was 132 homes. So nobody was displaced because this was more of an infill redevelopment, and people stayed on site, which I tell you, it's not the best situation when you're doing construction on site, but what we managed, and that's how there was really no displacement of the membership there.
Sorry, I'll also just add on that and just expand upon this example because not every site is going to be like this. That's going to give you that opportunity for people to stay on there, and the displacement is real. Right? We have examples like that. Another story, the story of Aaron Webster Housing Co-op. And housing co-ops are also unique because they're an entity. It's not like they're tenants, and like a lot of municipalities will have tenant relocation policies, right? Where you find homes scattered all over a municipality and people are relocated while they're redevelopment and given the right of first refusal. Our commitment is to the community that a housing co-op is, and that community is based upon their members. Those members need to move as a community. So when you start looking, and if you're growing your portfolio, and this is also part of like when you look at kind of the aggregation of assets, especially into something like a community land trust, is that you start to see where you can find solutions, whether it be properties that you might be adding into your own portfolio or working with other nonprofits and community groups or housing co-ops. And this is really kind of what happened when Aaron Webster was faced. Very similar, but they were still living in their buildings. Their buildings were facing, the city was about to condemn them. They had already had their balconies condemned years ago and sealed off. And they had exterior walkways that were being supported by 2x6s all over the place and gaping holes in their roof. The buildings were really becoming unsafe to live. But where are you going to move them at an affordability level that those members could afford? So we were successful in purchasing a brand new building in the Olympic Village at 95 East 1st. It was 135 homes. And as soon as we knew that we were the successful proponent to get that building, which was a turnkey building. For those who don't know what a turnkey building is that it's ready to move into. Somebody just hands you the keys, it's already all built. And then we were like, this is the solution for Aaron Webster. So conversation, once again on an evening with a board in a hot, stuffy room, and talking about, we have a solution on where we can move you, right? So, and we move them over to 95 East 1st, and they co-live in that building with another housing co-op called Rail Yard Housing Co-op. But that displacement is real, so depending on what you're facing with, you know, especially with housing co-ops, on keeping them together. So whether you are building a portfolio of places and you can start to look at how you can move people around, or might look to partner with other organizations and nonprofits that might have a building that you might be able to form a partnership with, even if it's on a temporary basis during a redevelopment, that you can move your community to. So, but it is real, and it's something that you do need to consider, because change is difficult for a lot of people, and then also managing the change when they come back as well.
So we're about 10 minutes left, so I think we'll have space for about 3 more questions. I've passed the mic to Samuel. Can you raise your hands so I can see? Okay, we can do Kathy, and then you up here in the front, and then we're good to go.
No, there's somebody in front.
Is it my turn? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Samuel first, then Kathy, and then we'll bounce here to the front.
Thanks for the presentation. I wanted to know if you're including any commercial spaces for local shops, community services in these buildings, and also are all these units rentals?
Sorry, I can barely. So we can barely, because I think the speakers are all facing that way.
Okay, just a little mic training, Speak into the mic. Not like this. Comme ça.
Sorry, if you could please, I heard community contribution, is it all rental? I'm piecing it together, so
Yeah.
sorry.
Okay, so I'll try it this way. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Are you including any commercial spaces in these buildings? So local shops, community services? And a second question is, are all these units rentals?
Okay. Did you pick up? Commercial. So it's 100% residential space. And it's 100% what would be called a rental tenure, but it's a co-op tenure. So it is not none of the units were stratified and sold off. So from equivalency, it would be like a rental tenure, and no commercial space. But it does have program space, amenity space for the residents. It has a daycare space, and it has a playground. So it's very from a community perspective, it was all centered around the needs of a community rather than a commercial use. Yeah.
Should also say that you're following municipal policy, so this wasn't an area designated for any sort of commercial spaces. So, but we do have what we would call the daycare, where it's like owner occupied, and there's a certain number or limit of children that can be in that daycare. But we do have buildings, so I don't know if you'll be on the tour on Sunday afternoon. You'll go to one of our buildings that we do have what we refer to as a mixed-use building with a community-led partner in there. And we also do have buildings as well with just straight commercial space that were also leveraged to generate like pre-sales to help with the equity gap to build the buildings as well. So we have a wide range in our portfolio, and whether it's nonprofit space or just straight like market retail commercial space as well.
No. Oh, it's on. I think it's on. I want to understand a little bit more the relationship between the land trust and Hoy Creek, because you call it a partnership, and you talk about leveraging this property to acquire more property. So is Hoy Creek Co-op and the land trust equal partnership in everything, or the land trust is like on top and they might acquire different properties and have partnership relationship with each one? You know what I'm trying to get clarity on? Yeah.
So the land trust is the owner of the land. We hold the debt, right? But we do have a lease with the co-op. But the co-op is a legal entity that then it also remains. So they basically have a lease with us that basically they can occupy. So they occupy the buildings and all the common spaces, right? So just like if they had owned it, they're still functioning there, but they don't have to take on the property management, the building operations, the asset management, and on the mortgage. The Community Land Trust holds that, but they still are there. They're in charge of their membership. They approve their membership. They have to make sure that their members are abiding by the rules and their occupancy agreement, so they're still functioning as a housing co-op. The underlying legal structure of the housing co-op that's regulated does not change, right? But the partnership is how we're working together, right? To not only make sure that the community of the co-op is thriving, but also thriving in what is called the real estate side as well, so that we don't end up into situations like what Hoy Creek faced, right? So, but we have that separate relationship and leasehold relationship with each one of our housing co-ops, but we do leverage our portfolio to bring in resources, whether it be staff or financing or opportunities for redevelopment that can benefit an individual co-op.
And also, if I can bring up the other future phases of this development. So the Hoy Creek Housing Co-op moved into phase 1, part of their relocation. But as the future phases develop, because Community Land Trust's interest is in the cooperative housing sector, we will be incorporating either a new co-op in phase 2 or Hoy Creek will expand into phase 2. Phase 3 will also be, of a co-op tenure. That is why what we do, we grow and expand the cooperative housing tenure. So each phase of this development will be a form of co-op. So that's just basically the general structure that even though the CLT is like the land owner, the underlying, the infrastructure and the tenure that gets created on that land is always going to be a co-op, if not a partnership with a nonprofit.
Hi, I think I'm next. So just building on that last question, I just am curious about what the ownership structure was like prior to the CLT coming in, and did Hoy Creek basically kind of have the same arrangement that now the CLT does?
You want to answer?
Yeah, so Hoy Creek owned freehold title to this property. That's why they were faced with a receivership. So the receivership at the time was limited just to the area that Zone 1, the demolition of the townhomes. But as it progressed, and looking at not only like the fire of those buildings, but also 2 other buildings that were also in disrepair and also financial stress on the housing co-op, there was a push for a full receivership. So the partnership aspect that came in there was really a proposal when we went out there that day in June that mapped out through the democratic process of a housing co-op to have the members elect to dispose of and transfer their freehold title into the community land trust in return for us to redevelop that phase 1 that would replace the 97 occupied homes and increase it to how much ever density we could get. So we ended up with 132 homes, and that we maintain the remainder of the redevelopment potential into the housing co-op sector, so tenure. So that gives Hoy Creek an option as we complete phase 2. They can decide to expand if they wish and increase their housing co-op by those new homes, or they know that if they don't want to, in our partnership, part of that agreement when they transferred the land into the land trust is that we would just incorporate a new housing co-op. So that guaranteed that when those members voted in that democratic process to transfer their land into the community land trust in turn for a partnership of redevelopment, but also ensuring that every home on this property would maintain in the cooperative housing sector.
Okay, thank you. So would there be any reason why a co-op wouldn't want to partner with the CLT, given kind of all the resources and equity you can potentially bring to the partnership?
Sure, because they might be able to do it on their own. Maybe they're not faced with redevelopment. There's a housing co-op that owned freehold land, a rare one, in the city of Vancouver, because most of them are on leasehold land. So if those are familiar with Vancouver, the Canada line, it goes out to the airport, and at the foot of Cambie Street and Marine Drive, Ashley Marr. Ashley Marr owned freehold property. So they partnered with the private sector for redevelopment, and it's right by a transit station, lots of density. So, you know, the headlines are something like 450 homes, you know, through a partnership with a private developer and Ashley Marr Co-op being built there. But I like to look at that headline as 450 co-op homes lost, right? Because they're not being, you know, they're replacing their existing homes and then a few more. They didn't leverage that property to be 100% maintained in the co-op sector. So with the Community Land Trust, that's our mission, right? Because we're owned by the cooperative housing sector. So that's what we do. But there are examples of housing co-ops that will partner with either development consultants, private sector developers. In fact, Hoy Creek, before the receivership, was in one of those partnerships. And if it wasn't, that's why I say the fire really is what created an opportunity. It's sad to say that it took a fire and a receivership, but that booted out the private developer that basically was just going to deliver them phase 1 and then sell off phase 2 as strata condos. And then when the receivership happened, that got rid of the private developer, right? Because they weren't going to get involved in that receivership, and we asked for 3 months to form that partnership. So if it wasn't actually for that fire and the receivership, this development, you would probably see those homes replaced and a bunch of $1 million homes built around them.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, guys.